back to Beyond Chronic Burnout. If you're neurodivergent, disabled, or work in a high pressure environment, Beyond Chronic Burnout helps you reclaim your well being and discover sustainable strategies for success, both personally and professionally. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the relationship between grief and burnout with the incredible Kate Rylander, a mental health counselor, grief specialist, and co founder of HonoringX, an organization supporting parents grieving the loss of a child. Kate's insights about grief as an expression of love and the ways it can overlap with burnout are so powerful. We also talk about practical tools like journaling, meditation. She and I are meditation buddies, and setting boundaries to help navigate both grief and the holiday season. This episode is all about finding connection, community, and compassion, both for yourself and others. Let's get started.
Step out of the shadows, feel the power rise, catch the spark inside you, let your spirit fly. Beyond the chronic burnout, carol dreams you'll guide, find your steady rhythm, nice joy on the tide. Flourish forward, bright and bold, leave the burnout far behind. In this journey, hearts unfold, power's yours, seek and find.
Kate, welcome to the show.
Hi.
So I love that we get to talk today because not only are we colleagues, but we're friends, and you're my buddy. You're my meditation buddy.
Yes, we are.
I love that we've gotten to get to know each other a little more. And one of the things that truly just spoke directly to my heart when we first met months and months ago was just your gentle, kind nature and just how you shine just so beautifully, just as this beautiful human that you are. And you're so caring.
Oh, gosh, thank you so much. You're so sweet. You're so good at what you do. Yeah, I admire you so much. And I just really want to thank you for that compliment.
Well, it's from my heart because you have touched my being in so many ways since we've met and connected.
And you have
I love that you've joined me for this conversation this month around grief because you are a grief counselor.
Yes.
And grief is something we were talking back in the green room before we hit record, and I said the whole reason that I'm doing this, it might sound, like, why would you talk about grief during the holidays? It's such a downer, right? But over the last several years, this is an experience, a topic, a conversation that comes up that I don't think is acknowledged, that it isn't allowed to have space because somehow there's this uncomfortable social norm that we have to put on a happy face during the holidays, and it's not okay for us to not be okay somehow.
Absolutely. I think that is a part of grief overall. And I think that is absolutely a big part of grief over the holiday time because people expect to be happy and joyous and all kinds of things. And I think that my clients certainly feel a sense of stigma when it comes. They feel stigmatized about needing to talk or needing space or being sad or missing their other.
Yeah, it really is. And I love that you wanted to start by talking about grief as this whole body experience, because I think when we think about grief, when it's something that maybe we haven't experienced with certain types of loss, right? Because there's all different kinds of grief, but there is this visceral, physical response. We feel grief in our bodies, and it's not just in my heart. It's not just like it's not like my heart's broken. And we talk about, the research when we say, like our heart is broken, our metaphysical, sort of not tangible heart, but then it's actually we physically experience a pain within our heart when we say our heart's broken, in this context of a relationship or whatever it is, that but we actually feel a pain in our chest.
Absolutely. Grief is something that cannot be thought through. It's something that involves so many thoughts, and some of the thoughts they're uncomfortable to talk about and they're uncomfortable to think about, and they involve so many feelings. I think of grief as being something very, very spiritual and soulful, and it involves every part of the human experience. I really do. I have a lot of people who are grieving someone, and they don't believe that people can really connect with them because they just won't understand. I don't think that these things are easy to convey with words because our language is so very limited. And when you think about it, we don't have a lot of words to describe our feelings, even though there are a lot of feeling words. But for example, love, we have one word for love. I mean, maybe there's a couple of others like adore and things like that, but really we say things like, I love my son, and we say, I love broccoli, and everybody just sort of knows that it's the same thing. Grief is similar. Grief is love, but it's a side of love that we don't think about. And so it's very, very, very hard to find ways to connect, which kind of causes some of the isolation we were talking about earlier in the green room, that stigmatization. People don't feel like other people understand them.
Oh, this is so huge. What you just said is that grief is an element of love, because truly, do we grieve someone or something that we do not have an affinity or a love for?
Right. When I think about grief, I don't really imagine it can happen without love. And I think that really anytime we enter into a loving relationship, we kind of sign ourselves up for experiencing some kind of grief.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got my mind going, and all. It's like all these dots are connecting over here.
It's a lot to think about, isn't it? It really is. And when you can think about grief as love, I think it helps us find an understanding of it that is a little bit deeper than thinking about loss. We're talking about an emotion that we know is big. Love is huge, right? And so why wouldn't grief be huge?
Exactly. Why wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think we try to compartmentalize our emotions. And we try to say, okay, this is love, and here's love over here, and here's grief over here. And, we have decided that it is separate. But I think what you've just gifted us is that it is this interwoven, it is this connectedness. There is not one without the other. Kate, that's huge.
I think that it's a very holistic way to look at it. And the other thing that I think that it does is I think that it helps us just leave behind the idea that we are supposed to somehow heal from grief or get over grief or be done with grief. We don't finish loving somebody. So why would we finish with grief? Grief is a change. It's not something that begins and ends.
It's it's just a change. Grief is just a change. I think about sort of the Victorian era mourning etiquette, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you've lost your spouse, then you were supposed to wear black every day for a whole year. And it's interesting because you go back and you think about it, sometimes they do these in some movies that I think are really good, Victorian classifications of this. And it's
Mhm.
maybe you need more than a year. Maybe you don't need a whole year. But then you're still subjected to these societal norms of what grief is supposed to look like in this time duration. Like, aren't you over this yet?
Shouldn't
Kind
you
of
finish?
approach.
Which to me doesn't make any sense, right?
It's
It doesn't
pretty
make
nuts.
right. It's a change in the relationship, but it's also a change within you. I counsel parents who have lost their child, and so it's not that they ever move on. They have to find a way to incorporate this tragedy, this change into the fabric of their lives. You don't go back to who you were before. And, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. You won't.
No,
Mm-mm.
we won't. Yet sometimes we even have these internalized expectations where we can be kind of mean to ourselves, saying, I should be over, quote unquote, over this by now.
Yes, we have a lot of shoulds. We have a lot of ideas of the way things should be, including the holidays. We think that the holidays should be a certain way, that grief should look a certain way. And really what that does in my mind is it makes grief bigger than what it already is because we're adding judgment to it. And if we just stop judging ourselves and analyzing ourselves and trying to shove this thing that's happening to us into a box and just experience it. It's a natural experience, as unnatural as it feels. It is a natural experience. And if we allow ourselves to experience it, we will be okay. Not that it is okay. I want to be very clear there, but we can be okay with the it not being okay. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That
Okay.
makes a lot of sense to me. We talked about as we were coming in to
Mhm.
the conversation today, how you were talking about how grief changes. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that I hear so often, especially when the holidays are coming up, it would be, I was doing really well. I was feeling better. I wasn't in this deep grief like I had been. And I thought I was navigating the holidays pretty well. And then all of a sudden, I was walking down the aisle in the grocery store and I saw a gingerbread kit and it brought all these memories back. And then I feel like I'm back there. And then it's like I'm navigating in this weight all over again. And that whole body experience of grief, it's that you can feel the weight, this physical weight of it sometimes.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, you can. You can feel the physical, and it can just be overwhelming. It can all of a sudden hit you, and you just feel like a wave hit you. And I think that we make it worse with that judgment. Instead, why don't we allow the wave to hit and notice what we're feeling is love, and we're missing that person in our lives, and that is okay. And it is really a very beautiful thing because we are loving that person. And then we can say, gosh, I really miss you and I really love you. And then once you allow yourself to do that, I think that you can start to remember those gingerbread houses with the joy that they initially had, the joy that they were initially intended to have in your memory, right? Those memories were made with joy. And I think that that can come back up once we allow ourselves to have those feelings.
One of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about, and you so beautifully brought all of these pieces together, and I went, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for, Kate. You read my mind, because you're just so brilliant like that. But there is this place where the symptoms, the experiences of grief are very similar to symptoms of burnout. And I would love for you to talk about the similarities between the experience of grief and the experience and symptoms of burnout.
Okay, I think that that is an important thing to talk about. So thank you for allowing me to do that. Grief and burnout have a very serious relationship with one another. Both things, both experiences include things like people withdraw emotionally, right? People have just had enough and they pull back. Both experiences can have an element of depersonalization. Okay. Both of those experiences can damage relationships with friends. And both of those experiences can lead to a situation where people feel like they've lost their purpose. Right? So when those things happen, people tend to pull in instead of connect. And one of the ways that we heal from big things is to connect. Connection is so, so important for people. I'm not sure about burnout. I'm not an expert in burnout. That's you.
Oh no, burnout is definitely, connection is a way forward.
Is a way forward, but I know in grief, I know in grief it is too. Grief is something that's meant to be witnessed. Okay, people need to be fully understood and heard, and they need to know that people hear and feel and see the uniqueness of their loss and the uniqueness of the person that they've lost, while also having an understanding, like a deep understanding of all of the things that they can't really articulate or express. And that happens through truly compassionate community, right? And that's just so important. It's important in grief and it is important in burnout. But instead, what happens, and I think that this is particularly important to hear over the holidays, what happens is people don't want to hurt other people's feelings. They don't want to ruin their good time. They don't want to burden them. They think that what they feel or think is too much. So they pull away, right? And then they might feel guilty for pulling away. And then guess what happens? All of those symptoms worsen.
You just brought up something I think is in this conversation really important to touch on and to really kind of highlight for a moment. And that is our expectations on what other people have the capacity to handle around our emotions.
Our expectations on, I think that that is a wonderful thing to talk about, because it can be very hurtful when we're talking to someone and we perceive that they're pulling away, or we think that they'll pull away and really they're right there. So I think that during this time, it's very important to be very authentic and not pretend and ask.
That's definitely one of the things that I learned for myself was to simply, and my husband and I do this together, if it's something really big, I mean, if it's like a big emotion that's come up for me or for him, we check in before we start to unload whatever that is, to be considerate of a reciprocity. And because for those simple things that we might see someone like pulling what we perceive as pulling away, but maybe it's like, I would totally be here for you with this. This is just a really bad time right now for me. Like, I've got to be somewhere in 5 minutes. I can't be present. So what he and I do is we say, I've got a big emotion, and this is going to take a little bit to talk about right now in this moment. Are you able to receive and be with me for this? And if the answer is yes, then great. And if it's not, then it's no. Right now is actually, I want to give you my attention, but I don't have maybe the capacity. Maybe I'm exhausted right now. I don't have my own bandwidth, or I don't have, like, I have to be somewhere in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to connect with you. Can I talk with you this evening when I get home? Can we have, sit down and do that then?
Yes.
And I do that with my girlfriends too. And it has been life-changing. And it's like, we also give one another permission to check in and go, well, what do I have the capacity for? And what do I need? What is nourishing right now for both of us?
For both of you, I think that's such a beautiful and respectful practice. I love that. And I think that when people do that, what I find in my own life too, is that when I do that, all of my relationships improve. They
really do.
They do. I feel like they improve. I feel like I can trust my people around me to tell me the truth, and because I've asked, and I can trust that they can take whatever I'm giving without those feelings of guilt. I don't have vagueness in my head where I'm worried and wondering, and all of that anxiety can go away. I think it's a wonderful preventative measure to take.
What happens, I think, so often in burnout and in grief and in any big uncomfortable emotions, is that we, especially around the holidays, think, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. I don't want to be the wet blanket on the party or the family event. Number one, we can choose to not go to the things that just really don't feel like they're going to be nourishing to us right now. But we can also stop trying to make the decisions for other people in what they have the capacity for. And we can allow other people to support us. And that's a big, hairy, scary. That's a big emotional and trust thing. Just be able to stand and say, in the middle of whatever your event is, or your day or your moment, to look at another person and say, I'm not okay. Can you be here with me?
That's right. I think that is a scary thing. And what I love about that is that when you force yourself to be authentic, you create authentic relationships. And you know what those are? And it can be a really healing and really beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we give people the opportunity to show up for us. We don't take that away from them.
No, we don't take that away from them. I think oftentimes people don't know how to treat people in grief.
Oh, 100%.
Yep. And they don't know what to do. So they're just trying to do it, and they are guessing at their effectiveness, and they're guessing at what somebody wants, and that can burn them out. And so it's so much better for them if the griever just tells them what it is that they need, what it is that's on their mind, and just is very open about it, because no one can read anyone's mind. That just can't happen.
Wait, we don't? Seriously, if I could like figure that out, we would be golden. We would be billionaires if we can figure that out, Kate. If we can read other people's minds.
I just want the people in my life to read my mind. That's all I really want. I want them to know what I need before I do.
Oh, I have alexithymia, so I don't even know what I need. I need help figuring it out sometimes. You talked about the grief and burnout having the ability to worsen one another. And this was something you and I've talked about before. And I asked this question, and I love that you're showing up with some ways to talk about this, because I know that in my experience, I was in burnout and then I lost someone very dear to me. And so then I was in burnout experiencing grief. And it was like burnout went from ghost pepper level 5 at a 10 out of 10 to a whole new layer. I don't even have a layer for this. Um, it was like somebody threw gas on the fire, but it's like the fire was so hot you couldn't even see it. It's that blue white that starts to disappear in the candle, that space that you can't see of heat.
Yes.
That's where I was
Oh,
going into grief with burnout already happening. But
yeah.
then there's the other side of this where grief can then, you can start to experience burnout within grief.
Mm-hmm.
And then how those two are like these accelerants. What have you observed, or what are some insights that we could sort of have around how grief and burnout can worsen one another?
Oh, in so many ways. One of the most insidious ways is that people, when they are already burnt out and then tragedy occurs, feel guilty about being burnt out because they don't engage as much, or they think that they didn't engage as well or as much as they could have. And that's a tough one to work through. And we have to give ourselves a lot of compassion. So that's one thing. Another thing is that when you're already burnt out and then you have tragedy occur, all of the symptoms are going to worsen. All of the symptoms are going to worsen. And I think one of the most important things that you can do is find community, authentic community, true community with people who really do have compassion for you. Self-care in finding gentle, or whatever it is that you need for yourself, and try to do those things without an attachment to the shoulds. I should not be going on this vacation because I'm grieving. Well, if we take the should out, what do you want to do? What do you think you need for yourself? I think that finding ways to express yourself that aren't work, finding ways to express yourself that feel good, like maybe joining a book club on grief, or art, meditation, whatever it is that can fill you and help you connect with yourself and your purpose again. I think that those things are very helpful.
On the burnout side of things, Kate,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to sort of hear the grief component that you've observed from your side. Is from the burnout component, I see how our withdrawal, and the more intense the degree of burnout is, the more we do turn in, the more, it impacts our communication skills, our communication ability, right? So sometimes we even have this numbness, this detachment that happens. We also can see, the pendulum swings, and then you have this hyperactive cycles and this dysregulation in the nervous system. What are the similarities, or how does this show up in grief in those ways?
I think the symptoms are almost exactly the same. People withdraw emotionally because the feeling becomes to be just too much, and they struggle to connect with people. Depersonalization happens, I think, a lot because of shock, going over the story and having to change their worldview to incorporate their new reality is something that is a big struggle for people. It's definitely a big thing that we do. And those relationships with family and friends can absolutely get damaged because of the way that we are feeling. I think connecting with groups of people, maybe new groups of people. There are groups out there. I co-founded one of them called HonoringX that connects with parents with parents. You want to make sure that you are in a group that is supportive, that you feel good in, that you don't feel talked over, that you feel heard and understood, and you also have the capacity to listen to someone else. Part of getting through this is that connection with others and finding some purpose in your ability to still help. We have this infinite spaciousness within us, and grief seems to take the whole thing. It seems to take all the space. And we have to be able to allow the grief to be there, but find that there's more, and see if we can find just a little bit of goodness also.
Yeah. One of the things that I've observed, in particular, when it comes to being in a state of burnout and grief simultaneously, or or you've been in grief and then burnout. You've been in burnout and then grief becomes part of your experience. The tendency to go to those extremes of either numbing out through becoming the workaholic and doing all the doing, because if you sit still, then the feelings show up and they're so big or you don't know what to do with them. And the other extreme is going to numb it out through, alcohol, other ways of numbing your mind and your emotions. And to me, that's also one of the ways that it worsens both experiences and conditions, is because we're so busy avoiding, trying to stay out of the uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because there's nothing around that. What are some things that, if somebody is in that place right now, and community or connecting with somebody or joining a book, that just seems like that is so far away from where I am right here. What's the small thing to get somebody there?
So first, I want to agree with you that all of those things are ways to avoid what we're feeling. And what we're feeling is going to stay in there, whether we work a lot or
no matter how hard we try to make it go away.
We're just making it worse. What I've done in the past in those situations where people are afraid of being overwhelmed by their feelings is one of the reasons why they avoid. And the first thing is to understand that avoidance makes sense. These feelings, whether they're burnout or grief, they're not good. They're not good feelings, but they are also okay and natural to have. And so sometimes we can set a timer or a space in our day to decide that we're going to meditate or sit with our feelings and allow ourselves to be with a lot of compassion. Notice when there's judgment, write that down, so that you can maybe process that with a therapist or a friend, or evaluate it yourself as long as you can be fair with yourself. And just give yourself time to grieve, and then go back, and then keep coming back to it. Keep coming back to it for these little bits at a time. It's almost like there's a grief or burnout will fill up a whole tub and the faucet's still going because our brains are still coming up with all of these ways to beat ourselves up about it. And we have to take a cup and dump some of that water out just a little bit at a time, but it'll get there. It'll get there, especially if we notice and we are intentional with our thought. We stop judging, stop comparing ourselves to what we think should be, and just take grief for whatever it is. Does that answer your question?
It does. What about when grief turns into this big grief burnout cycle, and it is just like chasing its tail? That cycle can be really dangerous. What can that cycle look like? What is somebody maybe experiencing who's in that grief burnout cycle?
Someone might need help. Someone might need to reach out for professional help. And there are all kinds of ways to get professional help. You can go in person, or now the telehealth has become something that is very available for people and achievable for people who are so depressed they don't want to leave their homes. There is a clinical component to this, and I would definitely seek professional help and definitely talk with a doctor if you are in a place that you are not okay. There are burnout tests online that are easy to access. There are complicated grief. So, complicated grief, I don't like that term so much because I don't really think that everybody gets well in a year, but you can tell if you need professional help sometimes by going through some of these inventories, is what they're called, but they're just tests. They're just online tests to see if maybe you might need some help. Be honest with yourself, authentic, and ask a friend just what they think, if they think that you might need some help.
I know for me, I didn't always have the capacity to recognize when I needed help because I was under the very harmful belief, I don't hold this anymore, but under the harmful belief that I was supposed to be able to handle everything by myself. I was supposed to be able to figure it out.
That's a very hard place to be because we are naturally social creatures and we need each other. We need each other more at different times, and other people need you.
You need you.
I need me, and I need other people.
And I know for me, the thing that really was the catalyst for my healing in burnout and grief, both, was realizing and recognizing that for me to show up for the people that I love, that I wanted to show up for, I had to show up for me. And then I had to love me enough to show up for me first so that I could love them.
That's right. And I think that that goes back to trust. People have to trust you to take care of themselves or to take care of yourself for a relationship to work.
Yeah.
Healthy relationships need people to not necessarily not go through anything, but to take care of themselves. If I'm in a relationship and the person I'm in a relationship with is dependent on me in part for their happiness, then I take care of them by taking care of myself. Right? We can't escape co-creation. We co-create our worlds. And so it's very important that we take care of our part of the world so that they are okay too.
Oh, most definitely. Kate, what are some ways that we can begin to help ourselves, help people in our lives that we care about during the holidays if grief is showing up big?
Listen. If you are the griever, listen to yourself. If someone else is grieving and you're trying to support that person, listen. If they say, geez, I don't want to go to that party, don't assume that they just need to be around other people and they'll be okay. Allow them to create something good for themselves. Allow them to create what they need.
A question that I heard that I've really taken to heart is, how can I support you?
I love that.
but not just asking it of someone else, but also asking it of ourselves. How can I support me?
Yep. What do I need?
Yeah.
What do I need? What do I need from this holiday to be okay?
And sometimes we can think, what do I need? And we think in these big pictures, but sometimes I rephrase it. And one of my clients said this is the question that she embraced and loved that really helped her the most. And it is, what do I need in this moment?
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I think that you brought up something important, and that is not to plan every day. You know,
Wait,
if
we don't what? We don't plan every day down to the nth minute? Come on. That's my security. Are you kidding me?
that's my security. No,
And in the holidays, it feels like everything is so planned, but I love what you're saying. We don't have to plan for every little thing.
no, we don't. And we don't have to decide that on this day we will do this and on this day we will do this. On this day, we can decide how we're feeling and how we're doing. And we can also decide that if we want to create something special and different for ourselves for some time during this season, something that commemorates or something that feeds us, something different, that's okay because things are different. And it's okay to accept that.
I think that's one of the things that comes in a lot around the holidays is we have these quote unquote traditions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have family traditions, work traditions, societal community traditions. And I think sometimes in grief, it can be one of two things, or I can't go that this is binary because there's probably more than one or two things, but I'm going to go with two that are usually the big contrast here. It's the traditions feel good and they make us feel more connected to the people that aren't with us during that holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps us. But then there's also the other side of it, that being part of that tradition or experiencing that tradition in the holiday season when that person isn't here makes it feel so much harder.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we don't allow or give ourselves permission to do both. Maybe one time this particular thing makes you feel good and close, and the other one, it's too hard. And it's okay in that moment to just go, no, I'm not. I'm going home, or I'm not doing this.
I think so. I think that we should have permission to do both. And I think it's important to ask ourselves, like you were saying, what it is that we need. A very, very dear friend of mine lost her mother when she was pretty young. And one of the things that connected her to her mom, and one of the memories that she loves so much, is making Christmas cookies with her mom. And so she spent a few years just hating Christmas cookies and having nothing to do with Christmas cookies. And then she thought, you know what? I don't like taking that from myself because I spend the entire holiday thinking, I wish mom was here because I would make Christmas cookies. So she decided for her that what would work for her was and she's been doing this every year. She pulls out a picture of her mom that she likes and she lights a candle and they make Christmas cookies together. And she talks to her mom the whole time that she makes Christmas cookies and just kind of spends that little bit of time for herself and she feels complete. That works for her. And she loves it.
That
So,
is so beautiful.
isn't that beautiful? It's something that I think is very, very precious. And we all have the power to create something for ourselves in these moments that honor what we need to have honored.
I love that. Kate, as we're wrapping up today,
Mhm.
for that person, maybe that mom who's lost their child, or the person who's grieving a loss in their life during the holiday, what is the one thing from your heart to theirs that you want them to know today?
I just so much want them to know that my holiday wish for them is that they take care of themselves, that they do whatever it is they need to make their time, their holiday, meaningful and beautiful authentically for them. That would be what I would say to my friends.
And if that isn't just the most beautiful gift, thank you so much, Kate.
Oh,
May you find your moment in this moment to simply be kind and gentle with yourself. That is my wish for you.
Carol, you're so wonderful. It's my complete pleasure to know you. You're just a real joy and you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate knowing you.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual, my friend. Thank you for joining me for this very important conversation. If you would like to connect with Kate, if you would like to have some resources to help you in your grieving process, we're going to have all of those resources down in the show notes. Thanks for being here and happy holidays.
Thanks for being here. It's been quite a ride. Energy mastery, let's turn the tide. Top shelf guests, dropping wisdom bombs. Join us next week.